Get out the insurance cards, get out the copays. The office is open, my friends. Brought to you by drroto.com.
What is up, and welcome into a very special off-season edition. We are the One and Done Show. We are your fast break of college basketball information. I am your host, Eric Romoff. You can catch me on those Twitter streets at FantasyNav. You can do your part in this enterprise by scrolling down, hitting those like and subscribe buttons. And he is enjoying a little bit of a time off, a little bit of a break to watch some of our favorite college basketball players get introduced to the NBA level in the Summer League. He is MC Holland 34 on Twitter. He is the captain of our ship, Mike Holland. Mike, how is it going tonight?
Hey, it's going good, man. I mean, it's still been 100 degrees down here in Texas for feels like eternity. So I'm just trying to stay inside. But yeah, it's been kind of slow, right? Obviously, with some of the college basketball news, the portal. Obviously, we finished our top 100 board. Now that Imani Bates made his decision to go back home, so that closes that up. Just been watching the Summer League games. Chet Holmgren, watching him perform, that's been awesome. Paulo Banchero did his thing, and obviously Orlando looks like they made it's Summer League, right? So you can take it for what it's worth. But, I mean, a lot of these top picks play, and you can start to see some of the flashes there. So it's been nice to kind of see that. And it was kind of funny, the Drew League game the other day, all the hype surrounding it. You had LeBron James doing his thing, and I know my man that he was going up against, I forget his name. I saw it the other day on Twitter. But all the screenshots of him and his facial expressions going up against LeBron. But it's like, man, he didn't play that bad of a game either. So he's got some stories that he'll be able to tell for a lifetime. It's just funny that, LeBron just kind of doing his thing with the Lakers, maybe not even being a title contender, depending on what Anthony Davis decides to do, with his body and all the games that he's set to miss, it feels like every single year. So, that was a fun game to watch. We're obviously in the middle of, July, so not a lot cooking up other than some off-season news. Been working on some pieces for the ACC. I'm working on that right now. Big East preview for basketball. Just finished that up. So just, kind of working on that as we start to work towards the season. I know we're drawing closer and closer to 100 games. But I'm excited tonight because we do get to talk to one of my favorite teams to cover, and that's none other than the Blue Blood itself, the Kentucky Wildcats. And we have to join us today is Chris Fisher from 247 Sports, covers the University of Kentucky and the recruiting for at the Cats Paws 247 on the 24/7 Sports Network. So we can get him pulled up. Chris, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks for making some time and joining us here tonight. Kentucky is obviously one of, if not maybe the most storied program in all of college basketball. So definitely excited to drill in on the Wildcats. And with that, wanted to kind of get a bit of a vibe check around this program, right? The Wildcats were 26-8 last season. That found them with a 2 seed in the Big Dance, and they had a National Player of the Year on there, or rather in their ranks. But then on the other side, fell to the 15th seed, St. Peter's Peacocks. So really just wanted to get kind of a broader sense around the mood around this program as we head into the upcoming season.
Yeah, I think right now things are still very raw. I think coming off one of the worst seasons in school history with, the 9-16 during the COVID year, and then Kentucky goes, 25-6 during the regular season. Fans are feeling good. Kentucky's a 2 seed. Then all of a sudden they get bounced by St. Peter's in the first round of the NCAA tournament. So you follow up one of the worst seasons in school history with maybe the worst NCAA tournament loss in school history. And so fans are still very, very raw right now. I think there was a segment of fans that had kind of grown tired of John Calipari. And, you can say it's the one and done and guys don't stay for 4 years but what it all comes down to is this. Kentucky won the national championship in 2012. If they win it in 2011, or if they win it in 2014, or if they win it in 2015, or if Luke May doesn't make that buzzer beater in the Elite Eight in 2017, if Kentucky wins one more national championship under John Calipari, you hear none of this criticism. That's what it all comes down to. There's certain fans that just have not forgiven him for leaving what they view as a national championship on the table with a parade of McDonald's All-Americans, first-round draft picks, lottery picks, number 1 picks, you name it. feel as though he hasn't done enough at Kentucky. And so when you combine 9-16 with a first-round loss to St. Peter's, fans are going to be very upset.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Definitely thought they were going to make some noise, especially with the way Tsheibwe played last year. But, moving towards this offseason, obviously the big news is that Tsheibwe is coming back for another year. We obviously saw what he did, multiple 2020 games, averaged 17 and 15. What were the factors that led to his return, and how do you think he's going to manage what's going to be like huge expectations this year?
Yeah, I think outside of Anthony Davis, you could make the argument that Oscar Tsheibwe had the most prolific individual single season in Kentucky basketball history. The first unanimous National Player of the Year, swept all 6 of the major National Player of the Year awards. And so when you talk about him coming back, I think there are 2 factors involved. Number one, NIL. I think a lot of people stepped up to the plate and, helped Oscar Tsheibwe coming back to Kentucky, help make that a reality. He's originally from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, so he's on an F1 student visa, which makes NIL a very, very complicated issue for him. And so Kentucky and its lawyers and those types of things, they had to wade through that process and were able to, jump through all the hoops in order to secure him for another season. The second thing is he has all the individual accolades. Now he wants a national championship and he wants to become a first-round pick. And if you look at his game from last season, I think the NBA wants to see him expand his game. They want to see him make perimeter jumpers, stretch the floor, catch the ball in the middle of the floor, and make basketball plays. And so I think that's what he's coming back to do, improve his draft stock and capitalize on the NIL, obviously, and win a national championship for Kentucky.
Yeah, it certainly all starts with Tsheibwe for Kentucky this year, and obviously he went out and really set the NIL market for himself. But while he is returning and that build, that focus starts around him, there's a fair amount of turnover on this roster, right? So taking a look at the familiar faces, the returning guys, we've got Wheeler coming back, we've got Jacob Toppin coming back, Damian Collins also returning. And it looks like CJ Frederick is going to be available after redshirting last year. So I want to get a gauge from you of this returning lot of players. Who do you see as the one that really kind of steps up to be sort of that running mate alongside Oscar?
Yeah, I don't think he will be the running mate to Oscar Tsheibwe necessarily, but to me, the biggest X factor for Kentucky this season is the emergence of Damian Collins. You're talking about a McDonald's All-American, a top 15 prospect out of high school, but a kid that wasn't necessarily physically ready to contribute at the college level, got pushed around, had trouble adjusting to the physicality, but he is an absolute freak athlete at 6'9", 6'10". I think he has the ability to be that shot blocker, that rim protector that John Calipari's teams have been missing in recent years. And I think he is the one guy that could take Kentucky from good to great. I think with the other guys, Jacob Toppin, Severe Wheeler, who led the SEC in assists, obviously Oscar Tsheibwe. I think Jacob Toppin kind of steps into that Keon Brooks role. CJ Frederick steps into that Kellen Grady role. You have Antonio Reeves, the transfer from Illinois State, coming off the bench, averaged over 20 points per game last season, steps into that Davion Mintz role as a scorer off the bench. But to me, what separates Kentucky from being really, really good to being one of those Final Four national championship contenders is what they get out of Damian Collins.
Yeah, it's going to be nice to see what his development's been like this offseason, as well as Jacob Toppin. I think they could bring, obviously some of that fight in the front court here. But every year it feels like Calipari, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, brings in top high school talent from around the country, and this year's no different. I mean, getting 2 of the top 11 on 24/7 Sports, Cason Wallace and Chris Livingston. It's a 3-man class. Is there an X factor in this group? And what do you expect from these studs that are coming in?
Yeah, I think Antonio Reeves might be the X factor of the 3. You have a Thiero, ended up being a 4-star prospect out of Pittsburgh. His father played for John Calipari at Memphis, so there's some family ties there. But I think what they'll get from Antonio Reeves off the bench will be really, really important as far as, just his ability to score the basketball. He's absolutely wired to put that thing in the hoop. And so, but with Cason Wallace and Chris Livingston, you have 2 guys that are, and like we just talked about with Damian Collins last season, these are 2 guys that are physically capable of contributing at a high level in college basketball from day one. Cason Wallace is one of, if not the perimeter premier perimeter defender in all of high school basketball. And it's just a winner. He does so many things to impact winning on the offensive end, on the defensive end. His winning mentality, took Richardson High School to #1 national ranking, which is, exceedingly rare for a public high school these days with all the prep powerhouses around the country. Had 2 wins over #1 ranked teams. You look at his travel team with pro skills and the Nike EYBL. Everywhere he's been, he's won. And so his ability to impact winning, his competitiveness, his competitive edge, I think will bring a lot to the Kentucky backcourt. And then you just have, Chris Livingston, who at 6'6", 200 pounds, is just a man-child on the wing. Reminds me a little bit of Keldon Johnson, who played at Kentucky a couple of years ago. Once he gets that, 6'6", 200-pound body moving toward the rim, whether that's in the half-court offense or whether that's in transition, he's really, really hard to slow down. And so the X factor for him, I think, will be the consistency with his outside shot. If he's making that, he's really, really hard to defend. So I think both of those guys give Kentucky something that they've been missing in recent years.
Yeah, and it's certainly tradition there that we find a lot of incoming recruits playing a big role for the Wildcats. You mentioned Reeves specifically coming in as a potential X factor from this team. If you're tuning in with us on YouTube, go ahead and hit those like and subscribe buttons and let us know in the chat, who do you think is the X factor for the Wildcats in the season to come? Chris, I want to sort of zoom out a little bit and talk about the SEC as a whole. This conference looks to be absolutely stacked yet again. Arkansas, Tennessee, Auburn, all really strong on paper, all in good position to enter the season among the ranked teams. Teams like Florida, Texas A&M, they've got some pieces that could certainly surprise as we look towards next season. So I want to know from you, is Kentucky the favorite to win the SEC, and how do you see it all unfolding in the season to come?
Yeah, I think at this juncture, I would probably give Kentucky the edge just based on what they have coming back from last season and, the knowns versus the unknowns. I think Arkansas is kind of right behind them. You look at what Eric Musselman has done at Arkansas, 2 straight Elite Eights, recruiting at a really high level out of the high school ranks, and has really mastered, I think, the transfer portal. I mean, you look at any high-level transfer, and I guarantee they have Arkansas on their list somewhere. And so when you have that combination of high-end talent, they're bringing in Anthony Black, a McDonald's All-American. When you bring in that high-level talent from the high school ranks and you mix it with some experienced guys from the transfer portal, that's where John Calipari has had a lot of his success at Kentucky. His best teams have been a blend of the high-end high school talent and then the experience, whether that was from the transfer portal or guys coming back from the previous year. So I think Arkansas will be right there. I think the physicality of Tennessee year in and year out is what kind of buoys them and keeps them towards the top of the league. And so I expect Tennessee to make some noise again this year.
Yeah, definitely going to be a fun SEC to cover. We enjoyed it last year. But Chris, before we get you out of here, just kind of want to ask you what the key factors to a successful season are this year. And if there's any pressure under Coach Cal after, like you talked about earlier, the last couple of years. And can this be a special year for Kentucky at the end of the day?
Yeah, I definitely think this team has the makings of being one of John Calipari's better teams. You look at the production they have coming back. This isn't the strict adherence to, recruiting one and dones that we saw early in John Calipari's tenure, where they lost, 7 or 8 guys off the roster year in and year out. They have some guys back. I think that experience level with the high-end talent of Cason Wallace and Chris Livingston. So I think the talent is there, the experience is there. I think the hunger is there. Having that type of season and then losing and being humiliated by St. Peter's in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I think this is something that could pay dividends for them next postseason. I think it's something that they're going to carry with them. As far as pressure, yes and no. John Calipari's buyout is such that I don't see him going anywhere for as long as he wants to be here. But with that being said, like we talked about earlier, coming off 9-16, coming off the worst NCAA tournament loss in school history to St. Peter's, there is a ton of pressure for John Calipari, not only to have an excellent regular season, but to pay that off in the postseason with not just an NCAA championship. Final Fours, all the national championships, those things are great. But there are a lot of Kentucky fans out there that just want to see Kentucky win the SEC tournament. And so that's something, at least as far as a regular season goes, has been missing in recent years. But Kentucky hasn't won an NCAA tournament game since 2019. I know with the COVID year, that makes it sound like an eternity, which it is. But there's a lot of pressure on John Calipari, at least from the fans' perspective, to capitalize on what should be another outstanding roster and cash it in with a Final Four and potentially a national championship.
Yeah, you consider what Coach Cal has been able to build from a roster standpoint. So to say that he's coming in with maybe his most talented team is incredibly high praise and very salient point, pointing back to his contract, right? You want a rough idea of what's going to happen, follow the money. And seeing him take advantage of that buyout is probably not the most likely thing in the world. So Chris Fisher, thank you very much for spending some time with us and getting us read in on everything going on with the Wildcats. For those of you watching, if you are not already, you can follow him on Twitter at ChrisFisher247. It's scrolling along the bottom there. Also check out not only his work, but also the fantastic community that is being built over at catspaws.com. Not only do you get up-to-the-minute news and insight, but you also get to interact with a bunch of Wildcats fans. It's a really fun environment to be a part of. Chris, thank you again for joining us tonight.
You bet. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
So with that, we will zoom out from Kentucky. We will zoom out from the SEC, and we will talk about the remaining players that still somehow were able to pick a new home as we are here into the dog days of the summer. I know that there were some extenuating circumstances and a little bit of contractual magic or taking advantage of some rules that ultimately made this possible. But Mike, why don't you kick us off and tell us about the latest piece who is heading over to DePaul?
Yeah, so DePaul is one of my favorite programs. I don't know if I just like the mascot, but the Blue Demon, that's pretty awesome, right? But historically, I mean, want to see this program get back on track. We saw it last year where, they're getting some talented guys. It's just really getting a full roster together. So you look at it here with LIU firing their head coach late in June. Errol Penn, they're pretty much their best player forward here, is transferring over to DePaul. So going to kind of strengthen that front court that we saw lose David Jones, who's now at St. John's. And then you've also lost Javon Freeman Liberty from that team, who was one of the better players in the Big East last year. So two critical pieces gone for DePaul. But Earl Penn, he can fill it up, average 17 points, 7 rebounds, a steal and a block. So he can get it done on both ends of the floor. It's really tough to keep him off the top 100 board. We had redone that board so many times, and then July hit, and he's someone that probably could challenge for that top 100 spot. It's always tough though whenever you see a guy like this, production like this at that level versus someone like like Jacob Grandison, who's coming over from Illinois to Duke, and he's already done it. Been a contributor on a top 25 team. So it's always interesting once you get towards the back half of these like transfer boards, even recruiting boards, because you just don't know how these guys are going to shake out going from like mid majors to high major teams. But another solid get for Tony Stubblefield. So I don't know if this is going to put them in the middle of the pack per se. But anytime you get someone like this, if he's able to make the jump, it's definitely going to make it a lot easier to for the staff to kind of play through him and play around him. So, what are your thoughts on DePaul getting this commitment from Errol Penn?
Yeah, I'm right there with you as you were kind of struggling to gauge where it will ultimately land them in the Big East. Right, this Big East offseason has been absolutely electric. It has been an arms race. DePaul has certainly been a big part of that categorization. Right. They've got 2 top 100 transfers in guards Gibson and Murphy. Sounds like maybe if this Penn transfer happened earlier, he might have snuck into your top 100 as well. Maybe if you took me up on that offer to make it a 101 list, he would be the last guy in. But ultimately, we're looking at a DePaul roster that has really loaded up on some new players. Like I mentioned off the top, it was a bit of qualifying circumstance. It was the head coach at LIU leaving that made Penn eligible to transfer over to DePaul. Second player I want to talk about is someone who's actually reclassified, and now that gives them a little bit of flexibility in their team. Why don't you tell us about what's going on with the Arizona Wildcats?
Yeah, so some pretty big news for the Wildcats here. Point guard Keelan Boswell, he's reclassifying from 2023, and he's going to play in this upcoming season. He's a 6'1", 180-pound guard from Chandler, Arizona. If you look at 24/7 prior to reclassification, they had him as the third best point guard and 18th overall player for 2023. So now with the reclassification, comes him sliding still the fifth best point guard in 2022 and the 30th overall player. So this is a really, really big get for these guys. We've seen, though, it's really tough for point guards and really just any player that reclassifies, right? You're coming into the college ranks a year earlier than expected here. But he's coming from the same high school that produced Ty Washington, your guy that's now in the Rockets, balling it up, and Josh Primo from my Spurs. Jabari Walker, who balled out in summer league, so he's coming from a pretty good high school squad here, putting some players into the league. So, it's going to be interesting to follow. Obviously, this is big news for Coach Tommy Lloyd. They lost a bunch of talent. You look at our guy Ben Mathurin that we played a ton in DFS, one of our favorite players to cover. Last year, they also lost Dalen Terry, Christian Coloco. So when you lose these type of guys that are probably going to be in the NBA for quite a while. And they've kind of struggled a little bit in the portal. You got Courtney Ramey's coming over. You got Cedric Henderson coming from Campbell. Kurt Reese's returning, as long as Uzelis Tabelis. But, it's just not quite the same team. I think they could challenge for top 25. But this news, if he's able to really do the thing and if he's really got the talent, could really take him up a notch. So what are your thoughts, on this move and what, how the Wildcats can look in the future?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly could use a bit of bolstering. You mentioned that they were a little bit quiet in the portal. So to be able to pull someone ahead a year definitely gives them a little bit more ammunition as they head into the 22-23 season. I was also thinking back to our conversation with Bruce Pascoe from a couple of weeks, maybe months ago now. You should be getting a little flag in your corner prompting you to watch that interview. The somewhat rare for Arizona domestic player, right? Arizona had really been stacking up with international guys. So cool to see a hometown guy. And like you mentioned, should be able to step right in and play a significant role in this offense. So, very much so the Wildcats have their sights on a Pac-12 title next year, and I think this certainly helps them in that pursuit. Last guy that I want to talk about was a little bit more recently, just a few days ago. We've got a 5-star forward that has reclassified himself. Why don't you tell us about what's going on with South Carolina?
Yeah, so big news. Not often do you see decommitments from North Carolina, but 5-star and might be the top player in 2023. I think 24/7 has him ranked as their second overall player in 2023. That's none other than 6'9", 210-pound forward Gigi Jackson from Columbia, South Carolina. It looks like he may be staying close to home and trying to accelerate his career moving forward. So, trying to get to the league as fast as possible while potentially looking like South Carolina's going to be the early favorite. So helping out the hometown, team here. We'll see if that news ends up dropping. He was the South Carolina Gatorade National Player of the Year. He averaged 22 and 11, led his team to the Class 5A state championship. Kind of interesting because South Carolina is not really someone that we were expecting to cover a lot this coming season. And now all of a sudden you get this news and everyone's going to want to see this kid play. So, they're coming off coaching change. Frank Martin's out. New head coach Lamont Paris. This is his first year. Man, their leading scorer returning this year averaged 4.2 points per game. So there's going to be massive opportunity for him. And I think someone that we're going to be rostering a lot in DFS. But, just really interesting news, the decommitment here. And, he hasn't picked South Carolina, but that's, kind of the thought. So what are your takeaways from this news?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the UNC side. I'm kind of curious with just how loaded that roster is. If this was just a matter of, he wants to get an opportunity for some considerable playing time right off the bat, right? Obviously, it is a huge loss to see this caliber of a decommitment, but ultimately, I mean, this roster feels like it can kind of withstand anything. So the story is for me much more of kind of the hometown story of whether or not he stays in South Carolina and continues to bolster this offseason arms race for the SEC, right? I mean, we're going to be talking a lot more Gamecocks than we probably anticipated, but with players like this, I mean, it'll be a very fun conference to cover, and like you mentioned, should have plenty of soft spots in the DFS game. So definitely one to write down in your little black book, to dog-ear the corner of that page, and to spin up as we are now. We're trying to count the days off air, 90 some odd days away from tip-off of the college basketball ranks. If you are not already, go ahead, scroll down, hit that like and subscribe button if you're on YouTube, and then get over to drroto.com, get yourself subscribed. At the top of the show, Mike spent what felt like a good 25 minutes talking about all of the research, articles, analysis that he has done and is putting together over at drroto.com. That is all information that is exclusive for our subscribers, as well as our members-only Discord, where we can get in there. We can talk about this college basketball game over the course of the offseason. There aren't a whole lot of outlets out there doing it, so this is one of the few places where you can get that off-season dialogue. It is also one of the only places where you can get that one-on-one interaction with Mike and all of our college basketball team over in the Discord. And finally, it is the best way for you to get this bread.
Thanks for stopping by the office. Get your fantasy prescription by subscribing to the channel and checking out drroto.com. And until the next visit, be well and take care.